legal representation. You know, I don't know about the one person who happens to have one unit that does short-term rentals just on occasion. And by the way, it's a 280 square foot studio that, yes, rents for better, but we're still talking maybe $80 a night, and they rent it for 200 nights a year, 100 nights a year. I'm just not sure that the test that we've got on the table is really reaching the majority, that we're trying to grandfather in those that have had this in place.
So, Randy, what would you rather do?
Well, I think the litmus test needs to be far more encompassing than 10. If they came back and said, we've got 400, I think that...
They're
That's
saying...
not grandfathering people in. That's creating a regulation that allows it.
But what I heard Richard say was that the research that he did, there are 10 people that this applies to. So we're really talking about 10 people.
Grandfathering
In those areas that are not covered by the ordinance.
Right.
Hold on one second, because let's understand what 10 people means. Okay, for instance, you're saying 10 people out of how many? If you're talking about a tenth of a percent, then you're getting into the point where I look at, let me finish what I'm saying, Gary. When I look at this, I say, you know what? If we're going to grandfather, let's be reasonable and grandfather the people that have been paying attention and not sort of set the bar too high, or let's not grandfather.
But John, you're trying to use the exception to swallow rule. We voted last time. Here it is. We don't want it here. Now I got a question of taking care of the fundamental fairness of the people. I don't care if it's 10 or 1,000. There's 10. It's a reasonable bar staff has come up with.
But let me share
Let's
with you
kick it
why
up
it's not,
there.
but let me share
I
with
don't
you why
want
it's not
400. It
reasonable.
was 400. I voted against it.
What if I bought a property 6 months ago, before this dialogue started? I've only been doing it for 6 months.
No.
And I bought it with the intent, but I should be grandfathered.
Why?
Why?
Because
Why?
I bought my, because...
That's subjective thought. That's subjective.
Yeah.
What are you doing to prove it? Are you paying resort tax?
Yeah, I've been paying, I bought
Well,
my,
he's
here,
saying-
let's walk
Hey,
through
I
the example.
gotta
Can I just
weigh
finish
in on
my thought process,
Randy.
please?
Okay.
So I bought a unit 6 months ago, and it's a unit that I rent out on a short-term basis, and I've been paying my resort tax, but I've only had it for 6 months. I bought it specifically for the purpose of doing this because...
You would qualify.
You would qualify.
You have another year to, you have another
You have
year.
paid more than 50% of your revenues
Qualify.
were short-term. You said all of them were.
How have we... then walk me through how I paid more than 50%.
50% of
all
your
your
revenues
From that unit.
for the last 2 years. So if you only owned it 6 months, your revenues
Paid 100% of your
are
revenue.
only the last 6 months.
I'd love to just see how that tests out.
Read the
Just from
text.
the mail.
Mr. Chair.
Daniel, one at a time, guys.
So-
One at a time. Daniel?
So last week I did meet with Trish Walker. We don't have previous information, but basically asked, how many people are paying resort tax in Flamingo and south of Fifth Street? She said the numbers are almost none. Very, very few.
That's correct.
So it leads me to believe that we're trying to protect the very few that base their business of being able to pay the mortgage on this property and pay taxes on this property on short-term activity. Generating $20,000 a year of short-term rental is minimal.
Yeah,
If your true business plan and this ordinance would hurt your business plan of being able to maintain and operate your property, and you're not generating at least $20,000 worth of revenue a year, I don't think that you're going to be affected by the ordinance. That means that you're really not renting this as short-term.
Daniel, what you say it just furthers my point. If you're one of the few people that have been paying resort tax, it seems a shame to me that you will be left out because we've set the bar at $3,000 and you only paid $2,000. I guess the question I would have to ask Richard is if the total number of people paying resort tax is so small, and we lower this number from 3,000 to 1,500, we're not opening the floodgates. Maybe
Well, again,
John.
I think what we really...
But I'm asking, what does it do?
John, I think the whole premise that you're going about, with all due respect, is wrong, because, first of all, staff came up with a two-tiered way. They're saying it's $3,000 as a way to help people who, you said, may have been doing it intermittently.
Or even extending that.
Hadn't done it in a while. And the other way is, hey, I bought my place with the idea of renting it out. I've been renting it out for the last 6 months.
The math doesn't
Then
work.
it doesn't matter, because over 50% of their income
Can I walk through it?
qualifies.
Can I just walk through the math, because I'm not sure?
Yes.
It's
I
not
must
just
not-
one,
maybe
it's
I don't
both.
understand.
Look at the top of page 6.
So I'm looking at, so have either
Yes.
resort tax, taxable room revenue equal to at least 50% of total room revenue over the past 2 years.
Okay, so now, stop there. That's what you would qualify under. You
Because
have
you're
been
100%.
paying resort tax, here's your account. If all of your rents are less than 6 months,
So I-
all of your room revenue is taxable, and you've been paying 100%.
So if I've owned a unit for 2 years, and 2 months ago, I decided to do short-term rentals, and I paid my taxes for those 2 months,
You would not qualify under that if you had for 2 years,
that's my point.
but
The
you
math-
just, that's why we actually put in a date here. If you look at the very, because, if people just decided because of this hearing to go into this business.
Yeah, that's the
we gave
whole
them
thing.
the
Well,
idea.
That's a fair point.
Yeah,
That's a
that's a-
fair
This is-
point.
You talked about people who've been doing this over the past several years, not somebody 2 months ago.
We
But
saw these
even if
hearings
it
months
was-
ago.
If it was 6 months ago, if I owned a unit for 2 years, I just don't think the math works if I bought a unit 2 years ago, for a year and a half, I had it as a long-term rental, and for the last 6 months, as a short-term, I'm not sure the math.
Those are not the kind of people that we thought should be grandfathered in there. We're talking about people who historically have thought they could do the short-term rentals, were coming in and paying
Making
their
their
resort
business out of it.
taxes.
Right.
And those are not
Saying it's a
people
gray area in the
who,
law, and they were compliant,
Right.
they're in a gray area.
Right.
Now we clarified the law, we don't want to,
We don't want to adversely harm those people.
right, who
Randy, I
who
think
thought in
this
good
is,
faith they were.
this is a small hole, and this is, these
I
are,
don't think 10 people's representative of what we've been talking about for 90 days.
but I think it's important,
Grandfathered.
and I hope the board agrees with me,
If it's 10 people, then why do we have all this?
It's a good question.
okay,
If
because,
it's 10 people.
welcome to the city of Miami Beach.
No, it's 10, it's not in the Flamingo district,
But
It's 10 people
but
that
wait
are
a second, guys.
complying with today's law.
that are outside of the Flamingo.
One at a time, one at a time.
Jonathan.
One at a time. Now, the only thing I want to be clear about, and I think that
Outside the Flamingo district.
that it's important that we understand when we're looking at this grandfathering clause, that we frame this and understand this is relative to what we've already done. And we're already saying, we're only talking about these districts and these districts. If the city commission changes the districts, then they have to also understand that everything is connected. Our grandfathering clause is not designed to make up in other districts if they change the districting, that they should also open up the grandfathering clause and open up other things as well, because everything is connected.
They're going to do what they
John,
want
it's
to
the
do.
same staff. I mean, George, you don't want to present this to the commission, right?
Yeah, but the
Well, I think it's important that that sentiment be
right,
be
they
expressed.
will present the ordinance as the planning board has
interrelated,
crafted it, so hopefully they can
intercomprehensive.
understand it. The minute that they start modifying it, or they could just tell us to go back and rethink everything, but if they want to tinker with the ordinance, you're saying, just so I understand the board sentiment, if, for example, they take one of the districts that you said it should be allowed, the commission decides not to allow it, and they leave the clause, the grandfather clause alone, and that will be applied to the district that.
That grandfathering clause may be
And it may
too
be-
restrictive in the new section.
Right, maybe only 5 other people get
that's for the
added,
staff and the
or
commission
maybe
decide.
40 other people.
Absolutely.
But they'll
Exactly.
decide at the time.